Thursday morning, it's the 24th of February 2022. We are a nation at war. I thought that's probably how it would be best to start the program. It's very important that we remember that our priorities need to be in the right place this morning. So we'll dart around the US and we'll look at some of the stories making the headlines. But we're also going to be very conscious of the fact that right now there is like a mass exodus from Ukraine as people are desperately sitting in traffic jams with their cars loaded with all of their worldly possessions, desperate to get out of there. And so we'll look at that. I just remembered my light's not on. I have a whole light back here that I forgot to turn on. Let me just do that, because you deserve the full experience. Where is it? Well, where is it? Hang on, because there's a void at the moment. There we go. See, it's better than the void. There you go. Look at that. Look what I've done for you. Now, what am I doing here? There's nothing worse than starting the show without the lighting in place. There we go. That's acceptable, isn't it? We're going to discuss Ukraine in some detail this morning. The Russians literally this moment have just captured the Chernobyl nuclear plant. Of all the places to capture, I think that it's kind of interesting that that's something that they've chosen. It seems kind of symbolic, really, doesn't it, in a little way? But it's probably the easiest place to capture, if you think about it. An abandoned nuclear waste site, it's a whole city. It's an abandoned nuclear city. Because remember, when the Chernobyl disaster happened and people were evacuated, they had to literally leave everything where it was. There was no time to pack up. And so famously, you go back to Chernobyl and you have a look at what it's like there, and there are literally toys still left in nurseries, and there are still books on tables in schools. It's a very eerie visual. Anyway, it seems like the Russians have already taken Chernobyl this morning, and this is not going to end well. This really isn't. I feel very sad about all of it, and I've been very emotionally involved with this because obviously I write about it and I talk about it and I broadcast about it, and I think I find it very hard not to have empathy for the innocent people of Ukraine who fundamentally are caught in the middle of this, because it's nothing to do with them, is it? It's just nothing to do with them. They didn't. There's a whole bunch of people in Russia today that are protesting that they don't want war, protesting on the streets of Russia. So actually, this is going to be a double-edged sword for Putin, because he's not just going to have to convince the Ukrainians and the international community. He also has to convince his own people at home that this is the right thing. And they don't want it. The Russians do not want this. They do not have beef with Ukraine. So there's a lot of protest going on the streets of Russia. And my fear is that if Putin turns on his own people, then we really will be in a situation. So much of this to consider and to think about, because, he is a very unstable person. And I listened to Donald Trump being interviewed on Fox News last night. He thinks that there are American troops going into Ukraine. That's what he said. It's like the guy who got us into all of this, let's not forget that Trump destabilized the entire relationship with Russia. And because of that, we are now facing, he contributed to this. I'm not saying it's all his fault, but he contributed to this. And still now, all these years later, it is years later, the guy still doesn't have a clue what NATO is. Do you know what I would really like them to do when they interviewed Trump? Say, what does NATO stand for? I guarantee he won't be able to give you an answer. It's just terrifying. It's just terrifying. Anyway, we'll talk about this together, and maybe I'll use this opportunity as like therapy to try and kind of work through my emotions, because I am, emotionally involved, and maybe you are too. So we'll discuss. If you want to get in touch, then you can message me in the usual way. Go to backchannel.tv. If you have a Echo Show speaker, with a screen on it, you can wake it up, say the word "say," and then your message. And that comes through to me here. And then, of course, there's YouTube, and you can comment on YouTube, and you can watch the show there too. It's 10 after 9 here on this Thursday morning on the West Coast. I'm in Los Angeles, California. Carla's producing. She's in London. Stacey is in Texas, and she joins us. Good morning. Thank you for joining us. As always, huge thrill to know that the team is back together. The band is back together. Some of the stories we're going to be looking at today, we're going to be discussing Ukraine, obviously under full-scale Russian attack now. We'll bring you the latest as it happens. We'll also, we're already feeling a hit in economics over Ukraine. Oil hits a 7-year high and shares sink. I don't have many shares, but I daren't look at them. You know, I just can't bring myself to look at what's happened to those shares. The problem with owning shares is it's like, you spend your whole life going, I should have done this. I could have done this. I probably should have done this. That's basically what you do the whole time. I daren't look at it. I'm going to have to take a long-term view. I'm just going to have to pray that in 5 years' time they recover, you know? And that I don't need the money in the meantime. Breonna Taylor as well. Officer was reckless during deadly raid, prosecutors say. We'll look into that story. Of course, the Breonna Taylor was like a landmark case, really, for the civil rights movement. So we'll look at that together. And we'll also take a look at the history maker and former baseball player, Mamie Johnson. So lots to do, lots to talk about, lots to share, as it were. On the newspaper front, Austin American-Statesman this morning, Abbott weighs into APD charges. Oh, Greg Abbott, I wish he would just shut up. Do you know what I mean? This guy is like... Ugh. He injected himself into a fight between police and prosecutors in Austin's 2020 protests, hinting on Wednesday he might issue pardons for the 19 Austin police officers indicted on felony assault charges should they be convicted. I mean, these red states in America have just become lawless. They're just lawless. When the governor just thinks, well, the police are going to be right, whatever. It's just lawless. And, we look at Ukraine and Russia and we think that's like a kind of, destabilized environment. Are you kidding me? It's just as bad over here. Texas in 2020 experienced violent protests that wreak havoc on our cities. In Austin, law enforcement officers defended the state capitol from criminal assault, protected the Austin Police Department headquarters from being overrun, cleared the interstate from being shut down, and disrupted criminal activity in areas across the city, Abbott said in a statement. Those officers should be praised for their efforts, not prosecuted. Time will tell whether the accusations against the courageous Austin police officers is a political sham. Time will also tell whether I, as governor, must take action to exonerate any police officer unjustly prosecuted. Oh, man. I just give up with that guy now, Just give up with that guy. I mean, there's less than a week to go before the Republican primary, so Abbott's proclamation of support for the indicted officers is the latest salvo in his ongoing political battle with Austin and Travis County officials over their handling of police reform efforts. Child gender cases rebuffed. This is Travis County again, another Greg Abbott, interference. The guy is just... This story is so offensive. It really is. It's basically, he doesn't believe in transgenderism or gender reassignment surgery. That's what this boils down to, okay? Just bear that in mind as I read this story. It says Travis County prosecutors push back on Governor Greg Abbott's call to investigate gender-affirming medical care as child abuse, saying on Wednesday that... He will decline to prosecute any such cases referred to their offices. The Republican leadership of this state is trying to turn loving and supportive parents into criminals, and this office will play no part in it, said Travis County Attorney Delilah Garza, a Democrat whose agency prosecutes misdemeanors. We will remain focused on protecting the community from true threats and keeping family safe. I don't know. I mean, I just despair. I guess that's how I feel, that's how I'm feeling generally this morning. When I woke up and read more about the Russian assault on Ukraine, I felt this great sense of despair, I have a friend there as well who's currently in Kiev, and she's reporting. I think I found out the difference between Kiev and Kyiv, Carla. Are you interested to know the difference in the pronunciation? Because obviously this is very important to me as an announcer. It's like I really want to get these things right. Apparently Kiev is the Russian pronunciation. So the Russians would say Kiev. Kyiv. All the US broadcasters say Kyiv. All of them. Because the spelling is different. The spelling of Kyiv is Kyiv. Kyiv. And the spelling of Kiev is Kiev. But here's the rub, though. Here's the rub. We're not on the side of the Russians anymore. So really, we shouldn't be saying it the way the Russians would say it, because that is like us endorsing the Russian occupation of Ukraine. Think about it. I mean, you don't want it. It's not a Russian territory anymore. I tell you what I did find very interesting. I was looking at the map. There is actually a Russian territory in the southwest of Belarus. A small territory. And, you know, obviously a lot of Ukrainians are going to be fleeing. And in the process of them fleeing, they're going to, you know, they're going to go to neighboring countries. And my worry is that a lot of these neighboring countries, they have some small kind of Russian communities in a lot of these neighboring countries. But Belarus actually has a Russian enclave right in there, like in the southwest. There's a whole Russian territory that belongs to Russia. Interesting. My point is like, you know, I don't know if they have any military capability there, but they could. They could actually, if there is a military capability there, I'm sure Putin could put one there. But what I'm saying is, if the Ukrainians move north, then to Belarus, then they're actually going to come across, and it's right by the Polish border, they're going to come across a Russian territory outside of Russia. It's just something to think about, you know? I think you have to think about all of these things. I don't even know what it's called. Maybe we could look it up and find out what that Russian territory is called. Robin's with us. Hi, Robin. Welcome to the show. Kitu is with us as well. Karan, first time on the show. Welcome to Backchannel. I'm Anthony. We're discussing obviously the invasion of Ukraine by the Russians, not just the separatists, but the Russians. I mean, the pretext for invasion was just a joke. Supposedly the separatists calling for help. I mean, this is exactly what Biden said all along. You know, Biden predicted this. The British security services predicted this. The French security services predicted this. Played out exactly as it's been said. Yeah, no, I knew this was gonna happen. I just think that, I don't know why. Maybe I did this with Trump. Like, people who are mad, I seem to have quite a lot of empathy with. You know, like the people who are insane. Putin is insane. Donald Trump is insane. Maybe it's because of my own mental health issues. I don't know, but I genuinely feel that I can connect with people. Like, I can't really connect with people who are just completely straight down the line and don't have, like, something interesting. Well, that was 2 weeks ago. You know, my fear, Carla's saying that I said that it was theatrics, and it was posturing at the time. But I think something broke, you know, there was something that broke with him. I saw it in his mind, you know, he made a speech like a few days ago. And I was like, this is interesting. Something has snapped with this guy. And I tell you what it was. Because do you remember I said that when Trump was in, Putin thought he was on a winning streak? And then suddenly Biden, like, reverses all of these things, kicks out all of the Russians, like, does all of this, you know, these sanctions. And I noticed that Putin was I was going to say pissed, but it's not the word. He was peeved because I don't want to say pissed. And I was like, whoa, something just changed with this guy. Like literally, like something switched behind his eyes. And I tell you what it was. You know, he's a control freak, right? The guy's a control freak. And he suddenly was out of control. Is that Crimea? No. Oh, yeah, they call it Crimea, but what's the name that we call it? No, that's another name for it. What's that? It's in the southwest. I mean, maybe it is Crimea. No, I don't think it is Crimea. Crimea is too big. It's yeah, it's not Crimea. Lilam's joined us. Jeremy says turn the volume up. I think he's talking to his Amazon Alexa device. That's fine. I can't turn my volume up. I mean, you wouldn't want my volume any louder. I think you're very happy with the volume that I'm currently giving you. Any more volume than this is more than enough. I do honestly feel, like genuinely feel, like we need to use this opportunity of this war to learn a little more about this region of Europe. You know, I really do. I think that because, you know, it's a bit like when Trump referred to these countries as S-hole countries. Do you remember? Like places where people lived that he didn't really have any respect for, you know, invariably black or brown people or countries that were developing or, you know. And I think that there's a great lesson here. I actually did a tweet that went viral last night. I put 4 photographs of the most beautiful, because Ukraine, I don't know if you know this, Ukraine is one of the most beautiful countries in Europe. I mean, it is absolutely beautiful and historic. So I found like 4 pictures of various things, palaces and, you know, churches and like lovely things. And I put it together and I tweeted it out. And it literally just like took off, you know? Like I'll tell you kind of how much business it's done this morning. It's at 103,000 impressions. The tweet's at 103,000 impressions. And it's because I knew that people wouldn't understand or wouldn't realize that what we're dealing here is not another S-hole country. We're dealing with a country that is actually historic and beautiful and has all of this, you know, it's rich in culture. I just pinged it to you, Carla, so you can see. And it's something that has to be preserved. It's not a country that can be ignored. You know, it's not a country that can just be put, because I do feel that in America maybe we do this a little too much. You know, we ignore countries that are not America, you know, at our peril. You know, we struggle enough with Puerto Rico or with Hawaii. You know, it's like can't quite get our heads around those being territories. You know, but the reality is that some of these places on this planet are just magnificent. I mean, it was the same with Afghanistan. Afghanistan was beautiful once upon a time. Iraq was beautiful once upon a time. You know, these countries that have been absolutely bombed to smithereens, they had rich culture and history and architecture and religious symbols. And they were really beautiful. And we just bombed them. And so my concern, I mean, I know that Putin is claiming to go for military targets right now, but the reality is that there's going to be a lot of knock-on effect with you know, public buildings and civic buildings and churches and all sorts of things. It's going to be a mess. And so yet another beautiful country will be potentially razed to the ground. I mean, there are missiles flying around right now. As we speak, there are missiles flying around. That's where it's at, you know. Let's jump back to the morning papers. The San Antonio Express News. Stacey, I'll do this one for you. Oh, she's having spaghetti for lunch today. That's nice. I do love a spaghetti. I make the greatest spaghetti recipe. If you're interested, I can give you the greatest spaghetti recipe in history in just like 3 ingredients. Are you interested? Are you interested? Well, you're going to hear it anyway. 3 ingredients. A white onion. Peeled, sliced in half, Put in pan, face down, with a little oil. Not much, little olive oil. A tin or a can of San Marzano tomatoes, or tomatoes, as you say, tomatoes. San Marzano tomatoes. Get yourself a nice tin of those. Big tin. You can get them in Trader Joe for about, I think they're $3.99. Very expensive. Arguably the best Italian tomatoes you can get. In the pan. And then you get yourself a knob of butter. You know, like a quart, I think they call it. Get good butter. In. A little salt and pepper. Lid on. Simmer. Half an hour. That's it. The butter melts into the tomato sauce. The best quality tomato sauce you can get. The San Marzano tomato. Nothing like it. Can't be any other tomato. You can't get just a random tin of tomatoes. It's got to be the San Marzano tomato. The butter melts and the onion marinades itself in and around all of it. And then after half an hour, you lift out the onions and you throw them away. You don't even keep the onions. You throw them away. So all you're left with is a delicious tomato sauce. Boil up some pasta, al dente, chuck it in, mix it up, serve it. No Parmesan cheese, nothing on it. Just the best quality tomato, good quality butter, and half an onion that you've thrown away. I'm telling you, it's a New York Times recipe. It is, hands down, the greatest spaghetti sauce I've ever had. Because the problem with, pasta and stuff is people throw so many ingredients into these things and you can't taste them. It's a bit like pizza. For me, the best pizza is just a Neapolitan sauce, or marinara sauce or whatever it is, a pizza sauce, the tomato, and then a little sprinkling of mozzarella, and then some basil leaves. That's it. It's all I want. It's all I want. I want to taste the dough. I want to taste a really good quality dough. I'm telling you, get into the San Marzano tomato. Life-changing. Life-changing. Comes in a can. It's a yellow can, this big, with pictures of tomatoes on the front. You can get it in Trader Joe and a bunch of other places. Never buy those pre-made tins of tomato sauce, like the Del Mio or whatever they're called. These ones that are like spaghetti sauce. They're full of sugar. They're just disgusting. They're disgusting. They're not even red. I mean, that's the other thing. If you look at them on the shelves in the supermarket, they're not even red. They're supposed to be a tomato sauce. They're not even red. They're mainly like orange. It's disgusting. Who has orange pasta? Ernestine is with us. Ernestine, hi. Jan, Harley, welcome to Backchannel. I'm Anthony. The San Antonio Express News this morning leads with Pentagon assault on Ukraine imminent. Well, that's a little out of date now, isn't it? Unfortunately, that's what happens with the newspapers. That was printed, I guess, late last night or early yesterday. A first lady hears about cancer disparities. Story about Jill Biden hugging cancer patient during her recent visit to the Mays Cancer Center at UT Health. Biden later visited a child development center at Joint Base San Antonio Kelly Field. City delays removing 105 trees from park. Interesting. That's good. Postponing any tree removal until late this year to ensure that historic structures in the park are adequately protected and the removal of heritage trees is minimized. A new release states that the city will work with consultants to completely design for improvements at the park and consult with the Texas Historical Commission, a panel of community members. Good. Never knock down a tree. Just don't knock down a tree. We don't knock down trees. It's not necessary. I wonder how easy it is to remove a tree, like a very, mature tree with all of its roots and replant it somewhere else. Do you think that's possible? Can they do that? I don't know. Like a mature tree. I don't know if it would survive a move. Because, some of these trees are historic. They're like 100 years old or more. I wonder if that's possible. Maybe if you're a tree surgeon, you can let me know. Ingrid, hi, thanks for joining us. Your first time on the show. Nice to see you. Well, I can't see you, but you can see me. And that's a dream. Ingrid's in Massachusetts. Welcome. Nice to know that you're part of the show. And Harley is with us as well. My sister's middle name is Harley, which I think is great. Because her surname is Davis. And I think my dad did it as a joke. Like Harley Davidson. My dad did it as a joke. And she's had to live with that. My sister sadly has got COVID. Again. For the third time. She's due to fly to Los Angeles tomorrow. Can't fly. Got the COVID again. You know why? Because she's in London right now and no one's wearing a mask. That's why. She messaged me, she goes, "Hey Tony, you probably heard I got the COVID again." It's so cute. My sister is the only person that calls me Tony. The only person. It's very sweet. Yeah. England and London especially has just become a kind of COVID hotspot. And you know why? Because Boris Johnson is trying to distract from his own inadequacies. He's trying to score some points with the people because he went to parties during the restrictions and it wasn't good for his politics. And so he decided to throw open the gates of restrictions. And that means that people are going to be less likely to think of him as doing a bad thing because there's no restrictions anymore. Because he knows that people have short memories. So he's just trying to, rewrite history, as it were. He's a bad man. I saw him being interviewed this morning, or he wasn't being interviewed, he was talking about the call he'd had with Volodymyr Zelensky last night. I mean, the guy just looked a mess. He wears shirts where the collar folds in, like he hasn't bothered. And the hair, I mean, seriously, it's embarrassing. I'm embarrassed that man is the Prime Minister of my home country. I'm embarrassed. He's a joke. It's like Krusty the Clown got a job above his pay grade. It's a joke. Wayne has joined us. Hi, Wayne. Thank you for joining us from Florida. Nice to see you. It's 12:33 Eastern. I'm Anthony Davis. This is Backchannel. We're just looking through the morning papers this morning. Strategic thinker had hand in city's success. This is James Jim R. Dublin, a PR man extraordinaire involved in every major economic development project in San Antonio during a career spanning 5 decades, died on Tuesday following a battle with cancer. He was 73. We're looking at the San Antonio Express News this morning, so there's some nice local stories. Let's move on to the Florida Times-Union. For Wayne specifically, Howland wins city council seat. He'll serve at large term through June 2023. He won a high-spending special election for Jacksonville City Council that burst expectations it would have lackluster turnout. The only race on the ballot on Tuesday. Do you know something? New thought of mine. Here it comes. I think that I'm hoping that Americans will never take their vote for granted ever again. And I have a feeling that when there will be elections, when the next elections come, 2022 and 2024, I think the turnout is going to be insane. I really do. I think that off the back of what has gone on before, with all this misinformation and Trump pretending that the election was rigged when it wasn't, and all of this, and it being repeated by his friends on Fox, and propaganda, and all this horrific kind of mashing up of the American vote and democracy. Because, misinformation is as bad as a rigged election. There wasn't a rigged election, but if you lie about it, then that's as bad as a rigged election. So he is rigging the election by lying that there was a rigged election. Do you understand? It's like, it is worse to lie about something that didn't happen. It's no different to Putin lying about the fact that, that Ukraine are the baddies and that Russia is coming to liberate the country and give it its freedom again. It's a lie. As Zelensky said in the speech yesterday, Ukraine is already free. What are you coming to free? It's already free. Russia's not free. You can't vote in Russia and have your vote accounted for. Otherwise, Putin wouldn't have won for the last 22 years. I mean, it just blows my mind. And of course, now, unfortunately, you've got Fox News and AON and Newsmax and One American Network and all of these kind of new news channels that are increasingly becoming mouthpieces for the conservative and far-right movement, this extremist movement that is appearing on the right, that claims the insurrection was just tourists. They're all repeating Putin's propaganda and turning Americans onto the side of Russia. This is what's happening. Turning Americans onto the side of Russia. And they're doing it in plain sight. It's not even a secret anymore. It's years ago, if there was any bias, it would be done subtly. The bias is not being done subtly anymore. It's like it's out in the open. It's loud and clear. And I want to quote a couple of people this morning whose work I've been looking at. Michael McFowle is one of them. He's a professor from Stanford, California. And this is what he said. Listen very carefully to his words. He said, please don't give Putin propagandists a platform on your media platforms. There is a time and place for hearing two sides of an issue. This tragic moment in European history is not one of them. Do not give false equivalency to voices of evil and voices of good. And what's happened now effectively is the right has taken the COVID approach with Russia. Weaken the security, deny the problem exists, say it's a democratic hoax, blame Democrats when it actually happens, and do everything to help the enemy. And trust me, when Sean Hannity or Tucker Carlson or Laura Ingraham or Donald Trump or anybody, even the former Secretary of State, I forget the guy's name, the fat guy who lost a lot of weight. You know the one I mean, him. He, and by the way, he definitely lied about how he lost all the weight. He must have had a gastric band surgery because there's no way he lost that much weight saying the way he'd said he did. So even his weight loss is a lie. Anyway, all of them are helping the enemy. They are giving credence to Putin. And this is what Putin wants. And this is why Trump was a mark for Putin. This is why Trump was colluding with Russia. He just didn't realize. And this is why the Mueller report said that Trump should be convicted, not exonerated. If anybody bothered to read it, as opposed to just listening to what Bill Barr paraphrased, which was not true. We have to be very, very clear about what's happening right now and why it's happening. And, they start with ballistic missiles and cruise missile attacks on key military infrastructure. Then there'll be airstrikes continuing into the night. Then now there's tanks rolling across the border. Tanks like chewing up the tarmac, rolling into Ukraine. They've all been sitting there for weeks waiting to go in. Putin claimed he is fighting to denazify Ukraine. And that's a lie. Zelensky's grandfather fought in World War II against the Nazis. His family is half Jewish. He was elected in a legitimate election. Putin is believed to be wanting to replace Zelensky with a lackey, with a Kremlin operative. That's his plan. He wants to bring down Zelensky and bring down Ukraine. And you know something? I think he's going to lose. I mean, I think that there's going to be quite a gunfight, but I do think that Putin will lose. Wayne says hi. Hello, Wayne. Welcome. Great to see you. Thank you for spending your morning with us, or your afternoon, depending on where you are. I think you're in Florida. Florida House to stop Stop Woke Act. Oh, here we go. Another one. Another Ron DeSantis flexing his Iron Man muscles. I mean, even me saying this stuff out loud, especially because I'm from England, where we just can't say stuff like this because this was all like decades ago, and we have evolved. We recognize now that humans are humans, and gay and straight are the same. It is the same to be gay that it is to be straight. It's the same. One is not different to the other. It's the same. You didn't choose to be straight. At what point were you like, something? I'm going to be straight. You never chose. Governor Ron DeSantis is probably gay. Let's be honest. This is probably where it all is. It's all inside. It's all inside. It's my First Amendment right to say this. It's just my opinion. It says Governor Ron DeSantis' call for new limits on how race is discussed in Florida classrooms and in the workplace is poised for approval in the Florida House, despite concern it will censor instruction, spawn lawsuits, and cause more problems for teachers. DeSantis set guidelines for the measure, HB 7, in December when he proposed his Stop Woke Act, which he said is aimed at fighting back against racial indoctrination in academia and corporate America. Well, that's worrying, isn't it? The Stop Woke Act, just by definition, it's like, for me, that's alarm bells. It's alarm bells, because you don't even know what wokeness is. You don't even make the effort to engage with what wokeness is and how it might actually benefit you. And how, because of wokeness, maybe more women will not be raped, or children will not be abused, or black people will not be lynched because of wokeness. Is that not enough for you? The fact that we are, all of us, more aware of the ills in society? The Republican governor said he was looking to block critical race theory, which examines the role race has played in shaping American history and modern society. While not taught in Florida schools, critical race theory has inflamed conservative media, and DeSantis has vowed to keep it out of the state. I mean, do you think I should just explain a little bit what this means? Because, CRT is a module that is part of some university programs, right? It's an optional module for people that are studying sociology and history, and critical race theory is a module. It's part of that, and it's for people who are in their 17, 18, 19, 20, 21 years of age. Those are the people that are, have the capacity to analyze this stuff. It's not for school children. It's not for elementary. It's not for high school. It's not for any of this. Not for any of this. It doesn't exist. But what they're conveniently doing, the conservatives in this case, who are white supremacists, not all conservatives, but definitely Ron DeSantis, because he keeps proving it time and time again. What happens is they've conveniently taken critical race theory as a brand, because, they love to brand everything, the conservatives. They're very good at it. They're very good at branding and marketing and picking out phrases that are going to stick with people. And so they've conveniently taken critical race theory, which means that by saying it, if any of their fans look it up, they'll see it's a thing. And unfortunately, these people are not smart enough to realize that it exists in a very small space in our society. But when they look it up, it exists. It has credence. So what they're left with is adding 1 and 1 and getting 3. Because to them, that's like, yep, there it is, critical race theory, we're not having that. And it's like, whoa, hang on. But what it actually is, and this is the rub of this, is that using CRT as an excuse to ban any talk of race in schools is just a solution to their white power. It suits their desire for white power. It serves no other purpose because there's no one standing up and teaching critical race theory. There is no one standing up and teaching anything other than American history. And American history, tragically, because much of this country was formed on racism, effectively, you are rewriting history. And if you are black or brown or an ethnic minority who connects with the history of African Americans in the US, or Native Americans, or immigrant Americans, and you feel that your story is being downplayed, undermined, or ignored, then you will feel marginalized, and then society will not be equal. Society is only equal when there is a common truth. And really what DeSantis and his boyfriends want to do is they want to eradicate this history to maintain their white supremacy. That's all they want to do. So they've come up with this critical race theory thing, which someone obviously found online and was like, that's it, that's what they're doing. And it's like, no, they're not. It's just normal, what history do you want to teach then? Do you want to not teach history at all? Maybe we'll just start history 5 years ago when Donald Trump first showed up. Maybe that's when you want history to have begun. When the white man was given the license to rise up again against the black man. Because, Derek Chauvin killed George Floyd on video and knew he was being filmed. And if you think about that for a moment, he knew he was going to get away with it because Donald Trump was the president. And fundamentally, the attitude of America was that, well, it's kind of okay now to do these things. Because the guy in charge also has these views. The same views as Derek Chauvin had. The same views that the killers of Ahmaud Arbery had. That white power is supreme. And I fear that, this is why the CRT and the wokeness, the anti-woke bill, it's all of it is just it's all doing the same thing. It's maintaining the power of the white man. That's all it is. Black people have known this for ages. I've only really come to realize the extent of this since I became woke. Hence, I'm proud of my wokeness. And I know it sounds ridiculous, and I know it's a bit, a little bit zeitgeist and right on, and I just don't care anymore. Jackson has joined us. Hi, Jackson. Welcome. Kathy, hello. Judith, first time. Kathy, your first time as well. This is great. Welcome to Backchannel. Obviously, lots to talk about this morning with the invasion of Ukraine, and hopefully you're feeling okay about it and not hurting, because a lot of people, I think, are carrying a lot of stress and anxiety and fear. And I had a couple of messages from friends, actually. I'll just let you in on a couple of them. My friend Alberta said, "What does Putin's threat mean? Nukes? ? Now, what she's referring to is Putin made a speech yesterday that said that if any country outside of NATO, it could be a NATO member, but a country, say America, on its own chooses to intervene, he said there will be effectively ramifications on a like never seen in history. So, yeah, he's basically threatening nuclear warfare. That's what he's doing. And I sadly think he's crazy enough to do it. That's my worry. I really worry. I do genuinely worry, because we're dealing with a madman. And this is why you must keep these people at arm's length. This is why you don't do what Donald Trump does and befriend these people. Because fundamentally, the next guy who becomes the president is not going to play that game because he actually has an understanding of world politics. And that's going to annoy Putin. What do you think? Biden should maintain the friendship with Putin just because Trump had? You think that's what we should do? Yes, Biden, well, now we're friends with Putin. It's probably best to stay friends with him. Why? Just because Trump didn't have an intellect and didn't realize that this is not how it works? It's very easy to make friends with people, especially dictators. We were saying on the program yesterday, the only leaders in the world that Trump had a good relationship with were authoritarians. Kim Jong-un of North Korea, Jair Bolsonaro of Brazil, Erdogan of Turkey, and Vladimir Putin of Russia. Let's hear a nice black story, shall we? Because it's on the front of the Florida Times-Union. City Council honors pioneering black naval bomb disposal tech. He was the first black explosives ordnance disposal technician in the U.S. Navy. Master Chief Boatswain Mate Sherman Byrd trained for that dangerous career in Florida in the late 1950s, going on to serve aboard multiple warships and with the nation's leaders until his death in 1971. His daughter, a Jacksonville resident, said she barely knew her father, but she wrote about his sacrifices and endeavors as he became a pioneer for the hazardous job of disarming bombs in her book, Quiet Strong. Cynthia Byrd Connor's father was honored on Tuesday with a framed Jacksonville City Council resolution, coming as Black History Month nears its end. Midshipman from Jacksonville University's NROTC program, plus explosive ordnance experts from the Navy and Army, saluted Byrd and Connor during the ceremony. There's an amazing photograph of him, of Sherman Byrd, training at the Naval Underwater Swimming School in Key West in the late 1950s. Very handsome man. And he's wearing that very heavy naval underwater swimming gear, scuba gear. So that's nice, isn't it? Something positive, The tragedy is that appears on the same front page of the Florida Times-Union as the story Florida House to OK Stop Woke Act regulates teaching of race in schools. Lovely. I mean, it's no coincidence that the Florida Times-Union put those two stories side by side on the front page. I fear that, in the late 1950s, people realized that things needed to change. And, it took another decade before things had changed. But now, we're going backwards. We're going backwards with race relations, going backwards with women's rights. We're going backwards with gay rights and trans rights. It's all going backwards. Only America, by the way. This isn't happening anywhere else in the world. This is literally just happening in America. If the country where I'm from, the United States of England, the United Kingdom of England, if they made an announcement that civil rights and gay rights and women's rights were being reversed, there would literally be a riot. Everybody would be involved. There'd be 6 people being like, oh, I don't want any part of this. I'm proud to have come from a country that has evolved beyond this. We've had a few slip-ups in the meantime. We have a terrible leader right now, but at least we are not a country that has this mindset that the past is better than the present or the future. It's harking back to a past. Trump used to do this at rallies. He would talk about reopening these coal mines and these coal plants and wanting to, good old clean coal, he'd say. And he'd disparage wind turbines and solar and say it was all terrible and how LED bulbs made him look orange. And all of it was just desperate to get back to this period of his youth in the 1950s and 60s and 70s where men could grab women by the whatever and get away with it. This is what they crave, the past. Because they could be racist and nobody would say anything about it. They could be disparaging of gay people and nobody would say anything about it. And it wasn't because there were fewer gay people or fewer black people. It was because people just kept their mouths shut. Because the white man was supreme with his horrific views and his racist undertones and his transphobia. And now, here we are in 2022, and the effects of having a guy who was this old-fashioned, racist, misogynistic, white supremacist in office for 4 years has basically wound the clock back on America. And here we are now with a pandemic that's out of control because the guy didn't know how to handle it, because he didn't care, because he was more interested in the election that year. And we've now got a war that we are indirectly involved with in Ukraine, which could spread to the rest of Europe. And in fact, the tragedy is today World War III is trending. I need a strong coffee and a lie down. This is a lot. This is a lot for a small man like me to handle. This is a lot. Like, my brain is just like, I just need a rest, need a vacation or something. But where do you go? You know, it's everywhere. These problems are everywhere now. The world's problems are our problems. You know, I think the days of thinking, oh, well, you know, it's happening 5,000 miles away, it doesn't matter, it doesn't bother us, those days are over. We're a global community now. You know, we are a humanity, it needs to stick together. And you know, I am feeling things for the Ukrainian people that I didn't actually feel in the first Iraq war. I mean, I was young, obviously, but I just, you know, I used to watch the TV and see those Scud missiles going up in the air. Do you remember those? It all became about the Scud missile, and it was terrifying. It was the first time we were watching a live war in real time on television. It never happened before the Iraq war. Live pictures of a war from the front line. Never happened before. And it visualized the intensity of the theater of war. And that's why a war zone is a theater, because it's dramatic. The people of Ukraine deserve more than this. The people of Russia deserve more than this. I mean, they're out protesting today. They do not want this. So where does it leave us? If you want a message, then be my guest, you know, in the usual way. Just go to backchannel.tv. Monkey just joined us. Steve has just joined us for the first time on this show as well. Welcome, Steve. Nice to see you. And we've got Mike and Lynn and Lovell, Jackson and Kathy and Judith and Sarah, Ingrid and Harley and Jan, Ernestine, Liam, Jeremy, Karan, Kitu, Robin and Stacey, of course. Thank you for joining Backchannel on this Thursday. It's just approaching 10 o'clock here on the West Coast. It's 1 o'clock Eastern. Let's listen to the daily podcast that I do. It's called the US News Update, and it keeps you across everything that's happening in America. You can download it wherever you get your podcasts. Here it is. It's Thursday, February 24. From the Volley Network, this is your daily US News Update. I'm Anthony Davis. Two prosecutors who'd been leading the Manhattan District Attorney's criminal probe into former US President Donald Trump and his business practices have resigned, the District Attorney's office said on Wednesday. Departures of Special Counsel Kerry Dunn and Mark Pomerantz came less than 2 months after District Attorney Alvin Bragg assumed office, taking over a probe into Trump and his family business, the Trump Organization. Bragg had indicated to the pair that he had doubts about pursuing a case against Trump, the New York Times reported, citing people with knowledge of the matter. Ron Fischetti, a lawyer for Trump, called the departures a sign that Bragg would not bring criminal charges against the former president, though nothing was official. Last week, a state judge directed former president and 2 of his adult children to answer questions in a probe under oath in depositions.
Meanwhile, a group of American truckers began a cross-country drive from California to Washington on Wednesday to protest coronavirus restrictions, taking a cue from demonstrations that paralyzed Canada's capital city, Ottawa, for weeks. More than 24 18-wheeler trucks, along with some 50 pickups and recreational vehicles, left Adelanto, California, about 80 miles northeast of Los Angeles. The self-styled People's Convoy is beginning an 11-day trek to the Beltway, a major highway encircling the U.S. capital, to demand an end to COVID-19 vaccine and mask requirements. Preparations are being made in Washington for the expected arrival of the convoy and other similar protests in the coming days. Your daily US news update is part of the Volley Network. To hear my live daily morning show, ask your Amazon Echo device to open Backchannel.
You can download that wherever you get your podcasts. It's just after 10 here on the West Coast, just after 1 Eastern. Welcome to Backchannel. I'm Anthony Davis. You have me for another hour before your pal Hal is here. We've been looking through the morning papers. The latest news on Ukraine is that Ukraine is now under full-scale Russian attack. And there are images of downed warplanes in Ukraine and residents of Kyiv awaking to war and obviously wanting to evacuate as much as possible. Blasts and gunfire as Russia strikes Ukraine right across the city, and destruction and fear as war is underway. So we'll keep an eye on that. Ukraine warning of a new Iron Curtain as Russia invades. I mean, man, these are phrases I've not heard since my childhood, The Iron Curtain. I mean, it's like, wow. Okay, let's continue with some of these newspapers this morning. And if you want to message at any time, you can just go to backchannel.tv and we can chat there together as well. The Bradenton Herald this morning, around 70% of Bradenton's recycling ends up in the landfill. I mean, it's just like every time I think that we might have kind of got some way closer to kind of dealing with our environmental responsibilities, I see this story. It's the same story, comes up time and time again. Turns out they're not recycling. Rinsing out your cans and breaking down your boxes is the first step when it comes to repurposing your trash, but chances are those recyclables are ending up at the landfill. According to the latest data from Bradenton's Solid Waste Division, around 70% of the recycling that gets dropped off are not processed at the recycling centre. Instead, they're taken to the landfill because of improper recycling, officials say. We know it's a big percentage. More often than not, it's being taken to landfill. Well, I mean, maybe you need to tell us how we can solve this problem. I mean, if this is anything to do with us, are we not folding things up, breaking things down? What more can we do to help you recycle this garbage? Maybe that should be the headline. Maybe the headline should be, break down your boxes to encourage recycling. Maybe that should be the headline. Just saying. Race theory, sexual orientation debate is heated in State House. Shouldn't even be a debate. This story out of Tallahassee, with culture wars heating up in an election year. The Florida House on Tuesday split along bitter partisan lines as members considered two Republican-sponsored education bills that target discussions of race and sexual orientation in public schools. The proposals, backed by Republican legislative leadership and Governor Ron DeSantis, have provoked heated debate in the Capitol and around the country in recent months, with Democrats and critics worried they could have a chilling effect on what can be taught in the classroom and could harm LGBTQ students. Just thinking about what it might be like to be black or gay in Florida right now. Just think about that. To be a school boy or girl and to be gay or black, knowing that these stories are on the front of the newspaper. Because, the kids are reading these newspapers as well. They're sharing these stories. They know. They know that their elected officials, their leaders, are advocating for the silencing of teaching about race or allowing people to be themselves. They know. So they now have to grow up in a state where they feel, rejected by society. Hopefully they'll all move to California. I mean, the way as it stands at the moment, there's very few states I could probably live in. California is having to do, more work than ever to kind of really make up for the fact that these people are behaving in this way. That these states are behaving in this way. I mean, Gavin Newsom, the governor of California, recently announced that he was going to pay for women to come from Florida or Texas to get their abortion in California, pay for their flights, pay for their accommodation, get them their abortion, get that covered, and then send them home. He was preparing a fund for it. They're also preparing a fund at the moment to pay for health care for undocumented immigrants here in California. Undocumented immigrants. The very immigrants that under the Trump regime would have been rounded up and sent packing. Here they were trying to arrange healthcare. Just saying. The Republican-led House is poised to approve both the so-called Don't Say Gay bill. I mean, it's so offensive, isn't it? The Don't Say Gay bill, just that phrase. It's just so offensive. Which takes aim at classroom instruction about gender identity or sexual orientation, and a measure DeSantis has labeled the Stop Woke Act. The bill's final passage could come as early as today. Similar bills are moving through the Senate process. In advance of the House final vote, Democrats offered dozens of amendments in an attempt to tone down the potential effects. They had a few victories. Their biggest win came less than an hour before the start of the floor session. Republican leaders withdrew a proposed amendment that critics said would have led to the outing of LGBTQ youth to their parents, even if they faced potential abuse. Oh, man. A plane crash lands at Sarasota Bradenton Airport. A twin-engine King Air aircraft with a landing gear issue belly landed on the main runway and slid to the edge of the grass at Sarasota Bradenton International Airport on Tuesday afternoon. The crash closed the airport's main runway for about 2.5 hours for removal of the aircraft and repair and cleaning of the runway. Rick Piccolo, the airport's president and CEO, said there was no injuries or fire. I don't think we lost any flights. Those that were on the ground were delayed, and those due to arrive likely diverted to close-by airports. I mean, a King Air is not a small aeroplane. It's like a 7-seater, or like 7 to 9 passengers, depending on the configuration. And the pilot was the only occupant of the plane. So, even though it's even if you walk away from it, it's still a crash. They say that any landing that you walk away from is a good landing. Did you know that? Something that you say in aviation. So even if you belly land with the broken landing gear, that's still a good landing because the pilot walked away without being injured. It's still considered a good landing. Which is great for me because when I was a pilot, I was such a terrible pilot that my landings were so terrible. Every time it was an embarrassing landing, I would say to my instructor, at least we walked away. It was a good landing. Dee Dee's joined us. Hi, Dee Dee. Jules is with us as well. Welcome, welcome. Dee Dee's first time from California. Welcome to Backchannel. Okay, so that's the Bradenton Herald done. We're just whizzing through the morning papers here. The news press for Florida is next. Oh, what? The Ukrainians say Kiev? This is very interesting. Carla and I are just discussing the pronunciation of Kiev or Kiev. Are you sure? Are you sure that the pronunciation now is not Kiev? Kiev. Kiev, and now it's Kiev. Kiev. It's very interesting. Well, every single newscaster in America and pundit and everybody is saying Kyiv. Every single one on every channel, even the President of the United States is saying Kyiv. So I think we're right. And they're wrong. That's what I think. I think that we're right. The news press this morning, they lead with event to shine light on local black history. After a 4-year hiatus, the retelling of the African-American history in Naples has returned to the Collier County Museum, closing Black History Month with the stories of this city's local heritage. The 2 p.m. Sunday, February 27 event, known the Know the Past, Shape the Future, will bring together local historians, personalities profiling black people in history, and present black-owned businesses. And it's been a tradition, said Irene Williams, Assistant Secretary for the Collier County NAACP, that was interrupted by the death of one of its organizers and then lengthened by COVID. It's been revived because it's helpful education for everyone, she said. I mean, they're having to, aren't they? Because, you know, if you're in the Florida district, you are having to battle against the likes of Ron DeSantis trying to ban wokeness. So this is the people rising up and saying we are going to learn about black history and we are going to make sure that our children know where we've come from and know that white people bought and sold and owned and abused black people for hundreds of years. Panther to be removed from wild is the headline. A male Florida panther may soon be removed from a Collier County farm after being labeled a threat to humans by the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. And also, smoking ban would allow cigars on beaches. What? It says cigars are just as stinky as cigarettes, maybe more so. They contain the same chemicals that contribute to secondhand smoke that can cause cancer. And they leave behind big, brown, unpleasant-looking butts. That's true. My dad smoked an occasional cigar, and I actually quite liked the smell for about 2 minutes. Because for 2 minutes, it reminded me of like a nice pub somewhere out in the countryside with a warm fire. You know, it had that kind of musty, indoorsy, you know, monoxide-y smell. And then afterwards, I was like, oh, this is disgusting. It's disgusting, you know? Cigars are disgusting. I mean, cigarettes are pretty disgusting, but cigars are particularly disgusting. Oh, yeah, I knew a lot of people that smoked pipes. Mainly women. Yeah. So why are cigars being exempted from proposed legislation that would allow cities and counties to ban smoking on public beaches and in public parks? That's a very good question. Doesn't say the answer. That's a very good question. Okay, that's the news press this morning. Let's move on now to the Orlando Sentinel. They lead with Putin orders military operations. Zelensky issues plea to nation in bid to fend off invasion. In a televised address, Putin said the action comes in response to threats coming from Ukraine. He added that Russia doesn't have a goal to occupy Ukraine. He said the responsibility for bloodshed lies with the Ukrainian regime. I mean, it's all a lie. It's all a lie. So don't believe a word of it. You know, it is just a false flag operation. That's what they call it. Also a headline, Florida's Stand Your Ground law has been adopted in more than 24 states since teenagers' death. Have controversial laws led to more vigilantism? It says when George Zimmerman pursued and shot to death 17-year-old Trayvon Martin on a rainy night 10 years ago this week, he was captain of a neighborhood watch group in gated Sanford neighborhood that had grown increasingly worried about a rash of burglaries and drug activity. Trayvon was returning to his father's hometown from a nearby convenience store, but Zimmerman, who had a state permit to carry a concealed firearm, said he acted in self-defense, and police photos showed him with a broken nose and a bloody face. He was later acquitted of second-degree murder by a jury for the black teenager's death. Well, 2 years ago, in a South Georgia neighborhood, residents also became alarmed about a rise in burglaries and break-ins. According to the police, 2 men grabbed a handgun and shotgun and got into a pickup truck, and along with a third man, chased Arnold Arbery, who was jogging through the neighborhood. They shot and killed the 25-year-old black man. The men were found guilty of murder by a jury last month. So the question is, have controversial laws led to more vigilantism? Ahmaud was killed because individuals here in this courtroom took the law into their own hands, said the judge. These shooting deaths and others in the past decade have raised questions about whether laws that expand the right to self-defense have encouraged vigilantism, including the Stand Your Ground laws, which Florida pioneered in 2005 and became a flashpoint after Trayvon's killing. Well, look at the Carl Rittenhouse case. I mean, there's another example of it, where self-defense is the argument. Rittenhouse has completely lost it now. I mean, he's really on a whole other planet. Now he's trying to fundraise so he can sue everybody that's ever wronged him. Because he's run out of money. And he's enjoying his celebrity status. If the guy was not guilty of something other than self-defense, he would have disappeared into the night. But the fact that he is now, a celebrity in the far-right movement is testament to the fact that that was his plan all along. These are the people he wants to be associated with. These are the people he wants to surround himself with. This is why he gets interviewed on Fox News. This is why he appears at a political action conference. If he wasn't the far-right, conservative, white supremacist character that he claims not to be, he would not be associating with any of these groups. He wouldn't be going on the shows. He wouldn't be a celebrity within the far-right movement. He would have hidden away and said, I don't want anything to do with this. And he would have just stayed home and mourned for the death of the two people that he executed in the street. But he doesn't. He's gone out fighting yet again, maybe not with an AR-15 style rifle, but with his fists and his newfound celebrity. And that's really the deal now, isn't it? This is what we're dealing with now. We're dealing with people who say one thing and do something else. There's a photograph of him posing doing this with a member of the Proud Boys that was taken just before he shot these two guys. This is the white power symbol. W here and P here. Something that Donald Trump does by accident and has activated a whole movement of people who think he's doing it on purpose. He doesn't have the intellect to realize what he's doing. That's just something that he does. Maybe he does do it on purpose, but I'm guessing he probably doesn't realize. But it's a call to arms for a whole generation of white, aggrieved youths. People who see it as a symbol of, their attention. Proud Boys, stand back and stand by. Remember that? When he was told to denounce the far-right groups? Couldn't do it. Couldn't do it. When Ron DeSantis, 2.5 weeks ago, was asked to denounce Nazism after a Nazi protest in Florida. Wouldn't do it. Wouldn't do it. They say one thing and they do another. Because, fundamentally, these people are white supremacists. And, Ron DeSantis, I've been fascinated by this Florida Surgeon General story. You know this one where this guy, Joseph Ladapo, Ron DeSantis' appointment of Surgeon General Joseph Ladapo was confirmed on Wednesday by the Senate, despite objections from Democrats who criticized his handling of the COVID-19 pandemic. The guy is an idiot. I mean, he's an absolute idiot. He's also a far-right sympathizer. He refused to support vaccines and mask wearing. Refused. Came up with a whole bunch of pointless, pathetic excuses. And this is the guy that DeSantis is appointing as the Florida Surgeon General. Let's hope there's not another pandemic in Florida with that guy in charge. The Senate Health and Human Services Operations Chairman Aaron Bean said Ladapo had gone against the COVID-19 narrative, which might scare people, but he follows the science and questions it. We have a national draft pick, said Bean, who also referred to Ladapo's Ivy League education not just as the best in our state, but the best in our nation. But Democrats argue that DeSantis has politicized the public health system. They question why they should trust Ladapo, who they contended doesn't act in the best interests of all Floridians, doesn't think independently, and evaded answering questions in Senate committee hearings. I'm kind of just speechless. You know, it's like, I wouldn't mind if, like, on the front of the newspaper there was one article that I was a bit like, oh, that's a bit worrying. Literally every article on the front of this page is, like, terrifying. On the Orlando Sentinel, Putin orders military operation. Florida Stand Your Ground law has been adopted in more than 24 states since the death of a teenager, controversial laws leading to more vigilantism. And Ladapo confirmed as Florida's Surgeon General. Terrifying. And then the final story is one more story. The family of Daniel Knight, who was fatally shot by a Winter Park police officer during a confrontation at his niece's wedding reception over the weekend, have since repeatedly disputed police claims that he was killed after attacking fellow guests and officers. Yet again, another police officer thinking it's okay to execute somebody rather than arrest them. Another black man shot by a white police officer, yet again. You know, how many shootings did I say there had been? Was it something like 57,000 shootings there have been in America since Joe Biden came in? I think so. Blows my mind. Next up is the Tampa Bay Times. Law wants a top USF job. The interim university president, a Tampa attorney, applies to stay amid a national search for a new leader. Also, their movement is not about moving on. The black teenager's death is one piece of a bitter and ongoing history. This is a story about Sabrina Fulton. It says she's exhausted. What would have been her son's 27th birthday just passed. The anniversary of his killing is days away, and everyone wants a piece of her. By the time she arrived at Hollywood's highly unique studio for more interviews, Fulton had already answered question after question about how she feels, what can be done, and what future holds for America 10 years after Trayvon Martin was gunned down at 17 by a neighborhood watchman. Fulton has spent much of the last decade ensuring that Trayvon's memory doesn't fade by organizing peace walks, creating a group of grieving mothers, and becoming the voice for the son who could no longer speak for himself. She's also attended the 2020 funeral of George Floyd after he was murdered by a Minneapolis police officer, and spoken with Ahmaud Arbery's mother after white men chased him down and shot him. Again, black teenager's death is one piece of a bitter and ongoing history. All the time, every newspaper, more black people being murdered by white people, often in uniform. Scott's plan to rescue America is the headline. Republican Senator Rick Scott wants to rescue the nation by declaring men and women biologically different, raising taxes on low-income earners, and spurring children to recite the Pledge of Allegiance. The Florida senator and chairperson of the National Republican Senatorial Committee issued his 11-point plan to rescue America on Tuesday morning, ahead of his appearance at this week's Conservative Political Action Conference in Orlando. The document released by Scott begins with a letter predicting the plan's derision by his political opponents. He says, "I'll warn you, this plan is not for the faint of heart. It will be ridiculed by the woke left, mocked by Washington insiders, and strike fear in the heart of some Republicans," Scott said. "At least I hope so." Man. I mean, like, he just sounds mad. Just sounds like a mad, authoritarian, far-right lunatic. And the crazy thing is like the people that don't have much money, the working poor, and even the unemployed, a lot of them are voting for these characters who are offering nothing for them. They want to raise taxes. They have no initiatives to kind of help you. It's jokes. You're voting for the wrong people. You need to vote for other people if you want to be supported and given the assistance that you deserve. Putin announces move into Ukraine. It says Russian President Vladimir Putin on Thursday announced a military operation in Ukraine, claiming it's intended to protect civilians, an announcement that immediately fueled fears that Moscow was offering up a pretext for war, just as the West had warned. And, okay, that was the Tampa Bay Times. We've got a few more papers here. Have I just been taking ages doing these papers this morning? It feels like it. Is it fine? Is it okay? I mean, I'm conscious that, you've written some very nice pieces here that we need to get through as well. Are we going to talk to your pal Hal today? Is it? Do we talk to him on a Thursday normally? I think it's Tuesdays and Thursdays, isn't it? So yeah, I think we should bear that in mind. That's good. All right, let's just remind you that Backchannel has a growing list of shows, including your pal Hal, who's on after me in about half an hour's time. We'll talk to him shortly, find out how he's feeling this morning. Haley and Alison Live, they wake you up in the morning. Live Every Day with Liv Harrison from Texas. So loads of shows, happens throughout the day. There's a whole bunch of them. I wish I knew what they were called and what time they were on, but no one seems to tell us. It would be lovely to have a schedule, and I could say, listen to this, then watch this here, do this. No one's mentioned it. But that's okay, I'm sure that information... I had literally have to sit and watch Backchannel myself for 12 hours to make a list of who's on when. Let's look at the Los Angeles Times this morning. Ukraine under attack. Putin warns against intervention. Biden says the world will hold Russia accountable. So, as we know, as we've been discussing, and a photograph, very moving photo actually, of a Ukrainian soldier keeping watch not far from Russia-backed separatists in the Shastia region in the east. I mean, these dugouts that they have, these trenches, this is when they've been fighting the separatists for the last 8 years. These trenches are not new. They didn't dig these for this war. This is the war with Russia that's been ongoing for nearly a decade. Ukraine has not been at peace. But the images of these dugouts, they looks like World War I trenches. It's very rudimentary. Also on the front of the LA Times, county to relax indoor mask policy. It says fully vaccinated individuals will soon be able to shed their masks indoors at Los Angeles County establishments that screen the inoculation status of visitors and patrons, health officials said on Wednesday. While not a complete easing, the revised rules, which take place at midnight Friday, represent a significant relaxation of the county's universal indoor mask mandate, which has been in place since July. I'm still going to wear my mask. Still going to wear it. I'm wearing my mask until the last shred of coronavirus has been eradicated from this planet. If it's gone from America but it's still in Africa, I'm still wearing the mask. I like wearing a mask. I am better looking in a mask, My eyes are nice. Actually, that's not true. I've got one eye looking at you and one eye looking for you. But the point is that when it's all covered up like this, much better looking. I could be anybody. I'd rather be anybody than this body sometimes. Invasion also comes in cyberspace. It says hackers have long targeted Ukraine but may hit infrastructure to deepen the chaos. Also, school mandates get voter support. Nearly 2/3 of California voters, including a majority of parents, support mask and vaccine mandates in K-12 schools, according to a poll conducted this month by the Institute of Government Studies at UC Berkeley and co-sponsored by the LA Times. You see, at least they're doing polls. They don't do them in Florida. Permit issue stalls OC oil spill probe. Oh, that was a horrific event. Do you remember when that happened? A federal investigation into the October oil spill that tarred parts of the Orange County coast has been stalled for several months while officials wait for permission to cut apart, remove, and analyze a portion of the ruptured pipeline. The U.S. Coast Guard said on Wednesday that the agency is still waiting for permits from federal officials before cutting part of the San Pedro Bay pipeline and transporting the damaged section to a lab for analysis. 25,000 gallons of crude oil gushed into the waters off of Orange County. Literally closed all the beaches on the West Coast. It was horrific. We bring this upon ourselves. Think of the wildlife. Think of the fishes. Think of the whole ecosystem there. All destroyed because we need to carry oil from over there to over here. And we do it with an age-old pipe that has not been tended to for too long. We bring these problems upon ourselves. Why are we still using oil? Why? You know, we've known about the alternative fuels now for like 40 years. I had a solar calculator when I was 2. We've known that we can power things through natural resources, such as sun or heat or waves or wind. We've known about it. We've been doing it. I mean, look at windmills. Old-fashioned windmills like in the Netherlands. They're not plugged into the mains. They just work. It's completely possible. It's all possible. But profit, oil and profit. I mean, there's a war on. What has happened to the price of oil? Has it gone down? Nope. It's gone up. Who's going to profit from war? Oil companies. Because we're going to need more oil during a war, you know? The New York Times this morning, Russia attacks as Putin warns world. Biden vows to hold him accountable. Large explosions in Ukrainian cities. Moscow says not to interfere. Yeah, I am worried about that threat that Putin's made. You know, he is a nuclear-capable nation, and he's also erratic. Sleepless nights in Moscow as a nation lurches into a conflict, and Europe hopes to pressure Putin by crimping cronies' lifestyles. You know that much of the money that Putin has, you know, this kind of Kremlin cash, it's actually distributed all around the world in oligarchs' bank accounts. That's why he kind of maintains control over these people. This is who these oligarchs are. They're basically, you know, they keep the cash. And so his money is going to run out because their money will be seized and their bank accounts will be frozen. 2 Manhattan prosecutors quit, putting Trump inquiry in doubt. Yeah, this was a crazy story yesterday. It says the 2 prosecutors leading the Manhattan District Attorney's investigation into former President Donald J. Trump and his business practices abruptly resigned on Wednesday amid a month-long pause in their presentation of evidence to a grand jury. According to people with knowledge of the matter, the unexpected development came not long after the high-stakes inquiry appeared to be gaining momentum and now throws its future into serious doubt. I told you, Trump's going to get away with it. He's going to get away with it. These prosecutors indicated that they had doubts about moving forward with the case against Mr. Trump. They confirmed in a brief interview that they'd resigned. The precise reasons for the pullback are unknown. Also, China First policy is shutting out the world. It says the miracle of modern China was built on global connections, a belief that sending young people, companies and future leaders to soak up the outside world was the route from impoverishment to power. Now emboldened by its transformation, the country is shunning the influences and ideas that nourished its rise. So there we go. That's the New York Times. I think we're almost there. Let's finish with the News Tribune for Washington. They lead finally with lawmakers consider catalytic converter law as theft rises. And, I mean, this is ridiculous. I'm still using those things. Ukraine declares emergency. Rebels ask Russia to intervene. And prosecutors leading probe into Trump business practices resigned. So there we go. That's the newspapers. We've been talking about Russia in some detail. We talked a little bit about oil, and the price of oil has surged past $100 to hit the highest level for more than 7 years after Russia launched an invasion of Ukraine. Global shares fell. The price of gold rose as investors worried about the possible impact of the conflict. Russia is the second biggest exporter of crude oil and is also the world's largest natural gas exporter. Methane! It's methane. It's not natural gas. I'm not going to get involved in the positive branding of fossil fuels. I'm just not. It's methane. You know, the same stuff that comes out the backside of cows. It's what it is. The price of oil topped $105, which is a record high, apparently, as Russian forces invaded Ukraine early on Thursday in a massive, widespread assault seen as the largest military operation in Europe since World War II. Global stocks plummeted in the wake of the news, while gold soared to its highest level in 13 months, as investigators sought out safe havens to weather the crisis. Oh, and crypto and Bitcoin slid as well. Good. I just can't get my head around these cryptocurrencies. I must feel like, it's enough with these already. But, I appreciate it's probably the future. I just don't get it. We were going to talk about Breonna Taylor. We kind of already did a little bit, didn't we? This is after the jury is deciding whether a former detective showed extreme indifference to human life during the raid that led to the death of Breonna Taylor. It was Brett Hankinson. He allegedly fired 10 shots blindly into a neighbor's flat in the melee that followed a no-knock search of the black woman's Kentucky home. He's now standing trial on 3 charges of endangerment. And Miss Taylor's death sparked racial injustice rallies across America. I mean, the guy just needs to go to prison. He executed somebody who was like lying in bed. It's just not, you can't do that. Doesn't matter if she was black or white, or if she was the cat or a dog or any breathing creature, mammal in that room. You do not blindly fire a gun into a dark room that you can't see. Could have killed a whole family. She was a paramedic. Six of the shots of the 32 that the officers fired struck Miss Taylor. Prosecutors allege that in the raid, some of the shots fired by Hankinson entered a neighboring flat, endangering 3 people inside, as I said. They say this is not a case to decide who is responsible for the death of Breonna Taylor, Kentucky Assistant Attorney General Barbara Maines Whaley said during the opening remarks on Wednesday, but more whether Hankinson had showed extreme indifference to human life during the raid. But Hankinson's team sought to portray him as an experienced officer who was facing a confusing situation. Okay, well, here's some advice. If you are facing a confusing situation, leave. It's a bit like if you're driving, right, and you're at a crossroads, and you look, and you can't quite see whether there's a car coming because there's a bus in the way or something. Do you pull out, or do you wait? Defense attorney Steve Matthews described the scene as total chaos in the trial. Mr. Etherson said he believed the raid was reckless and described a chaotic scene with bullets shedding through the walls of his apartment shared with Miss Taylor, covering him in debris and only narrowly missing him and his son. He said he woke that March night to a boom, then heard several shots and felt debris falling on him. When his glass patio door shattered, Mr. Etherton said he went to see what was happening but was faced with officers pointing guns at him. The case in Jefferson County Circuit Court is expected to take about 2 weeks. It's the only trial stemming from the death of Miss Taylor. In 2020, her family sued Louisville police and reached a $12 million settlement. A grand jury cleared the 2 white officers who actually shot Taylor but charged Hankinson for endangering neighbors in the adjacent apartment. He has pleaded not guilty, but if convicted, could face up to 5 years in prison. Miss Taylor's death, along with that of George Floyd in Minneapolis, sparked nationwide protests against police brutality and racism against black Americans. Maybe it's time to stop referring to people by their, heritage. Maybe we need to stop referring to black Americans as African Americans and just call everybody Americans. I don't know. I just feel like the jury's out for me. Is it a benefit? Obviously it's important to recognize one's history and heritage and race. Of course it is. But is it detrimental to African Americans to refer to them as African Americans when most of them have never been to Africa? Is it detrimental to integration to refer to people by this title? Because, we don't do it with white Americans referencing where specifically they're from, do we? We don't. If your heritage is Eastern Europe, Ukraine, and you were born in America, you don't say Ukrainian American, do you? It's just something we can think about and talk about. We don't have to, I'm not saying this is what we should do, because I don't know. It's just an open conversation. But I have thought about it recently. Are we doing a disservice to Americans if we highlight the specifics of their ancestry? Or is this all part of the necessity to recognize their ancestry? Because, of course, black people want to be seen as black people, not to be lost, mixed in and amongst the white supremacists, of course. This is the whole point. And I remember listening to the radio and hearing to NPR and hearing the host say, she was interviewing a black guy about race. And she said, because I don't see color. She said, I'm not a racist. I don't see color. And he said, I want you to see my color. He said, that's the whole point. I want to be seen. See my color. See my culture. See my race. Don't ignore it. And with that in mind, then African American is suitable. Maybe Black American is better. I worry that African American just gives white racists more ammunition, We're going to talk about Mamie Johnson very quickly. The baseball... It says, baseball might be the America's pastime, but there was a time when the sport was unjustly segregated and black players were regulated to a separate league. The Negro League was not only open to people of color, but it was also open to women, and Mamie Johnson was one of the 3 women to play right alongside the men, and the only woman to serve as a pitcher. They named her Peanut for her small stature. After retiring from baseball, she went on to work as a nurse. However, she loved educating people about the Negro League and her beloved sport of baseball. Black History Month, but only for 5 more days? So, we're going to have to squeeze them in. I mean, I'm sure we can talk beyond Black History Month about great black Americans from history. But Mamie Johnson, she was 5'4", 120 pounds. Kind of amazing, really, isn't it? She died in December 2017 after a lengthy illness, it says. Stopped playing after the 1955 season, becoming a nurse, the occupation she'd have for the rest of her working career. Lived in Washington, D.C. She rooted for the Nationals later in life and was selected by the club in 2008 draft when living Negro League players were drafted to current major league teams. Interesting. Are we ready to talk to our friend? Is he here? Is he here? No, maybe in a couple of minutes. We're going to talk to your pal and my pal, Hal, find out what's happening in his show. Although I need to make more of an effort to ask him what's happening in his show, because we end up always talking about something else. We were talking about me appearing in a Superman film the other day, and I sent him a photograph of it, and he sent me a very nice email back. It's very cute. It's very cute. I might just have a little quick look to see, what the latest is in Ukraine, just so I can end with this, end as we began. It says, the latest news, Russian forces captured Chernobyl nuclear plant amid invasion on multiple fronts. A Ukrainian spokesman condemned a totally pointless attack. Former Ukraine defense minister says Russian troops trying to get to Kiev. Biden is set to address the nation at some point, imminently. And McConnell says withdrawal from Afghanistan was an invitation for autocrats to make a move. Why is Mitch McConnell saying that? It has nothing to do with this. Donald Trump wanted to get out of Afghanistan in May, and Biden delayed it till September. Why are they politicizing that? The French President Emmanuel Macron is well placed to analyse changes. Drove a cooperative, if self-conscious, Putin round the gardens of the Palace of Versailles in a tiny electric golf cart in the summer of 2017 and welcomed him to his holiday residence at a fortress of the Mediterranean coast the following summer, where Putin descended from a helicopter carrying a bunch of flowers. and complimented Macron on their tans. Wow. Anyway, after Macron held 5 hours of talks with the Russian leader in Moscow opposite ends of a 15-meter table, he told reporters on the return flight the tension was palpable. This was not the same Putin he had last met at the Élysée Palace in December. He said it was a more rigid, more isolated, and was off on an ideological and security drift. You see, I told you, Putin has changed. He's out of control, and he's furious. Josh, Muez, Gwyneth, Gary, Jay, Jomana, Dee, Zuo, Jules, Monkey, Steve, Mike, Lynn, Lovell, Jackson, Kathy, Judith, Sarah, Wayne, Ingrid, Harley, Jan, Ernestine, and Lillian, and Jeremy, and Kitu, and Karan, and Robin, and of course Stacey. Thank you for joining us on this episode of Backchannel. We're gonna talk to your pal Hal now and find out what's happening with him. Mr. Rudnick, good morning, West Coast.
A pleasure to see you, Sir Anthony Davis, even though it is the end of the world as we know it.
Yeah.
And I feel fine, to paraphrase REM. Yeah.
How have you been feeling? Because I've been carrying, when I obviously first reported on this last night, I had to rewrite a whole load of stuff that I was working on because of the invasion. I have just been in this deep sadness, this real palpable feeling of sadness and helplessness for the people of Ukraine. What about you?
100%. I mean, first and foremost, you have to think about the people's lives directly affected by war. People who are literally losing from their lives to their homes, and then way down the list, is how it's going to, the ripple effect that we'll encounter here, safely, 6,000, 3,000 miles away or however. Yeah, but it's filled with all sorts of feelings. I did see a meme though. I try to keep my sense of humor through, try to laugh to save from crying sometimes, but I saw a meme where it was a child making a little bit too much of an adult face, like an expression you only see adults make, and written on the meme was, "I'm a little bit tired of living through unprecedented world events."
Right. Just when you thought it couldn't get any worse. I mean, that's the crazy thing, isn't it? We thought we were going to get some respite after the pandemic had died down, and now, of course, we're into effectively a world war because, of course, it's Russia versus NATO. And although, did you hear Donald Trump being interviewed yesterday, and he thought that it was American soldiers going in? Did you hear that?
Oh, was he on? Was he when he went on?
He was on with Laura Ingraham, I think.
Yes.
And the guy literally has just no concept of what's happening. He just overhears people say things and then repeats them and gets them wrong, and then that becomes his opinion. And then, of course, it gets reported, and then it becomes fact. And before you know it, it's like a whole movement.
And and I watched that clip, and when he was on with Laura Ingraham, he said, if I was in office, Putin wouldn't be doing it, and maybe one day I will tell you why. He literally said that.
Yeah, well, it's because of the PP tape, isn't it?
Yeah, because of the PP tape, because of his debts to oligarchs, etc. And it's because he's Putin's boy. He was in Putin's pocket.
But you can see how conservatives can look at that as a positive, They can look at it, because I do think it's important for us to have empathy for how people who are Trump supporters might react to this. And their argument would be, well, surely it's better to befriend these people, and then they're not going to, do nasty things to you.
And having that opinion, they don't understand that this is a megalomaniacal leader who is invading a sovereign nation. If you believe, if you have an ounce of belief in the things that America purportedly stands for, like freedom and democracy, you should be outraged if you are American of any stripe, Democrat, Republican, Green Party, etc.
But does America stand for freedom and democracy?
Well,
I mean, half
when
of
you-
it
when you-
does.
Yeah,
but,
when you
but
lift
actually
when you
not.
lift the rock, when you
Yeah.
lift the rock and look what's under there, there's a lot of bloodshed, and there's being the world's policeman for many years.
Yeah.
It's often not pretty, and the true story of how we came by our democracy is, there's a lot of ugliness to it.
But even the modern democracy, if you are voting for a leader who claims that the election is fraudulent when it isn't, then you are not supporting democracy. And
Well,
if you claim that you want to be free and yet you're voting for a leader who is an autocrat, then that is not freedom either. And if you're in a country where domestic terrorism is the biggest enemy, white on white killing or white on black killing, white Americans with their guns, then, we're not either of those things. We're not free and we're not a democracy.
Absolutely. I mean, with Donald Trump and the election lies, we have entered unprecedented territory. I mean, I think, here's a dirty secret. I love this country, but every president is probably guilty of some kind of war crime when you get down to it, with the collateral damage that has happened from drone strikes or invasions, etc. So there's blood on everyone's hands, but Donald Trump took it to a special place, like pulling the thread, unraveling, like the one thing that we thought we could depend on, voting.
Yes. And it's a shame. And my
big
worry,
lie.
I was actually saying on this show earlier that I am hoping, because I do believe in people, I really do trust people. And I'm hoping that in 2023 and 2024, when there is votes, midterms and then general election, I actually think that people are going to come out in droves. I think there will be even more people will vote this time than did in the last election. And the last election was an unprecedented number of voters. I think even more people are going to come out. I think that all of this is teaching us lessons about the value of the free right to vote, because it's literally the only thing we have left. Otherwise, people like Ron DeSantis are going to continue kind of silencing black people, gay people, Nazi, sympathizing, and all of this stuff. So the only way to do it is with the vote. There's no other way to do it. These people are authoritarians in their own vicinity.
Yeah. I hope sanity reigns, and the people speak on behalf of the system we have in place. But that being said, if someone of the powers that be does not like the result of the vote, are they putting these mechanisms in place where they can cry foul? And who knows? Donald Trump should have been congratulating the American people and the Postal Service, the U.S. Mail, for an unprecedented election during a time of pandemic. Instead, started the big lie.
Yeah.
What a dope.
What's
egomaniac.
What's happening on your show today, Hal? It's important.
Well, there will be some dopiness and nonsense on my show, but hopefully in a more lighthearted way. We're going to talk about, there's no way around the world event, so we'll talk a little bit about that, but then there's also going to be pop culture, some nonsense, and some timeline cleansers,
Oh, good.
Oh, yeah, but I can't not address the elephant in the room.
I understand. Well, I hand you the baton of the elephant. I've been talking about the elephant for a couple of hours, and I'm thrilled for the respite. So you run with that, my friend. You run with that.
Thank you, Anthony. And I always appreciate your perspective and hearing your point of view. Thank you.
Of course. All right. Take care. That's your pal Hal. He's next here on Backchannel. I'm Anthony Davis. I'll come back tomorrow morning at 9 a.m. Pacific. That's 12 o'clock Eastern. And we will spend another couple of hours chatting and putting the world to rights. Have yourself a really good Thursday.